Hello and welcome. In today's talk, we explore how the ancient teachings of Buddhism offer practical tools and perspectives to support mental well-being, calm and resilience in our modern lives. While Buddhism has a rich spiritual and philosophical tradition, we'll focus here on how elements of its practice, such as mindfulness, ethical living, meditation and insight, can contribute to reduced stress, reduced depressive symptoms, and improved psychological health. We will also highlight some of the scientific research that supports these benefits. Buddhism begins with the recognition of what is commonly called the Four Noble Truths. 1. That suffering, dukkha, is part of life. 2. That there is a cause to suffering, often craving, aversion, and ignorance. 3. That cessation of suffering is possible. And 4. There is a path to that cessation. This path is often laid out in the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. By bringing attention to how our mind functions, how thoughts, feelings, and perceptions influence our inner state, Buddhist practice invites a kind of mental hygiene and inner work. One of the most visible bridges between Buddhism and contemporary mental health is the practice of mindfulness, sati, and meditation. In Buddhism, these practices are understood not merely as relaxation techniques, but as means to observe the nature of experience, how thoughts arise, how feelings move, how the self is conditioned. For example, a review titled Effects of Mindfulness on Psychological Health, a review of empirical studies, concluded that mindfulness-oriented interventions bring increased subjective well-being, reduced psychological symptoms, and improved behavioral regulation. Another systematic review found that mindfulness-based interventions significantly reduce symptoms of depression, SMD 0.33, anxiety, SMD 0.35, and stress, SMD 0.39, among university students. Thus, meditation practice grounded in Buddhist ethics and awareness can support psychological resilience. Buddhism also emphasizes ethical conduct, often expressed in the 5 precepts, pankasila, such as abstaining from harming living beings, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. Recent research found that observing these precepts in a Thai sample was associated with lower perceived stress and fewer depressive symptoms. While I note the exact peer review article may require subscription access, the relationship between ethical behavior and lower psychological distress is increasingly supported in cross-cultural work. Why might this be? One possible explanation is that ethical living reduces inner conflict, increases self-control, enhances self-respect, and supports trust in one's own behavior, all of which contribute to mental health. In other words, the mind is less burdened by guilt, regret, or inner dissonance. So how might you apply these Buddhist-inspired practices for mental well-being in everyday life? Start with short meditation sessions. Even 5 to 10 minutes of mindfulness of breathing, noting the inhale-exhale or the body sitting, can help build attention and calm. Reflect on the 4 foundations of mindfulness: body, feelings, mind, phenomena, to become aware of how you respond to stress or emotion without necessarily reacting. Live with intention. Ask yourself daily, how am I speaking? How am I acting? Am I aligned with kindness, honesty, and clarity? Cultivate loving kindness, metta, and compassion for yourself and others. Buddhist framework suggests that as we widen our circle of care, emotional burdens like anxiety and isolation may decrease. Integrate awareness into daily tasks. Mindfulness need not be only seated. Walking, eating, working can become opportunities for being present and reducing automatic reactivity. It is important to emphasize that while growing research supports the benefits of Buddhist-derived practices for mental health, they are not a panacea nor a substitute for professional care when serious conditions, such as major depressive disorder, trauma, or psychosis, are present. For example, a recent review found that mindfulness meditation moderately reduced anxiety, pain, and depression, but improvements in broader well-being and other outcomes were less consistent. Moreover, another article highlights that while mindfulness has been consistently linked to higher life satisfaction, lower depression, the evidence base still includes heterogeneity in designs and outcome measures. Therefore, the key takeaway: Buddhism offers a framework and practice for mental well-being, but must be engaged with awareness, appropriate guidance, and, when necessary, professional support. In summary, the teachings of Buddhism on understanding suffering, cultivating awareness, ethical living, and compassionate action offer meaningful pathways to support mental calm, resilience, and well-being. The scientific evidence is increasingly affirming many of these benefits, especially in the areas of stress reduction, depressive symptoms, and psychological regulation. Whether you identify as Buddhist or simply adopt some of these practices, the core invitation remains to be attentive, intentional, and kind, both to yourself and to others. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please consider sharing the video description and feel free to explore further the practices of mindfulness, reflection, and ethical living.